Yes, thank you so much, Becky. It was a brilliant talk, and I'm very excited to see the findings from the Swim Sea trial. Yes, so we're now going to move on to the questions from the audience, and you can still submit your questions for the link at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So our first question is for Liz. You spoke about the limited research on positive health outcomes, and when including positive health outcomes in studies, which kind of outcomes would you feel should be prioritised, and do you have a reason why?
Oh, that's like asking me for a Christmas list. That's a dangerous question. I'm going to go out there and say I think positive body image is a really important one that is often neglected. People often think of body image as being, oh, it's just aesthetics. Actually, it's the key reason why most people pursue weight change, even if we might not want it to be the key reason, it is. So positive body image and body acceptance is a really important thing. And I would say elements such as positive affect. We know that it's not just the opposite of negative affect, which is measured a lot. Positive isn't measured particularly often. And probably things like the sort of longer term well-being variables like eudaimonic well-being, meaning and purpose, just to check that people are remaining sort of, the big things in their lives are remaining okay as they go through intervention processes. So that would be my top 3.
I would completely agree. That's brilliant. I'll hand it over to Becky.
Yeah, okay, so I have a question for Charlotte. So you mentioned briefly the Rejoin project. So do you have an idea of what sort of intervention might be useful for the barriers you identified in your survey?
Yeah, so the approach we're going to be taking is motivational interviewing, which is a well-defined approach used for a range of different behaviours and shown to be effective. The important thing about motivational interviewing is it's person-centred, so it's very much focused on the individual and helping that individual to identify ways that they can make behaviour changes that work for them. And in order to do that, we really need to understand about the context of COVID, the barriers that people have experienced, and we need to learn how we can deliver these sorts of interventions in ways that are going to be acceptable to people who are going to need them. So in the Rejoin programme, we're taking this person-centred approach informed by motivational interviewing. There are 2 main phases to the project. It's only a short 6-month project, so really just sort of scratching the surface, but we're going to be co-designing an intervention manual, which is going to be sort of like a toolkit of different strategies that could be used in this context. And then also doing some process evaluation with people who are already doing a similar intervention in a slightly different context to understand what their experience is of this intervention. Is it acceptable? Is it feasible? And is this something that could be rolled out on a broader scale?
And I might have missed this, but do you have an idea of the format of the intervention?
In terms of how it would be delivered?
Yeah. So are you thinking digital?
Yeah. So obviously with current disruption, that's been one of the enormous barriers for COVID, is the disruption to weight management services and treatments and groups. So we really need to look at something that can support people. So yes, we'd be looking at something digitally. So using Zoom, something like this, which we've all become good friends with. So motivational interviewing, it's kind of like a conversation really between the trainer and the client, and there's a lot of reflection and sort of problem solving, and this can be done digitally, but we need to work out the best way to do that. But the idea is that it can support people not just during COVID, but also other times of disruption. Say, if somebody was unable to, someone was unwell or had broken their leg and was unable to get to the gym, how can we have these sorts of interventions in place to support people?
Okay, great, thanks Charlotte. So I have a question that I can open up to all of you. So someone has asked, do we know the types of people who find weight management interventions helpful versus those who may be at risk of having a negative response in terms of mental health?
I might jump in there. So it was an aim of my systematic review to investigate this, but unfortunately there wasn't enough evidence for us to be able to make clear conclusions. But I am currently working on a project which is looking at predictors of change in mental health. So hopefully that will be able to add to the field. But we're going to be looking at things like socioeconomic status and what we were calling non-modifiable by the intervention, so age, gender, socioeconomic status, those kind of demographic values, but then also things that may be able to be modified by the intervention, being eating behaviours and more psychological flexibility kind of things, resilience, those kind of factors. So we're hoping that will build knowledge in this area. I don't know if anyone else has any kind of insight.
I think you would probably be best placed to answer it in your yeah.
I think it's too early to know at the moment. It's too early to know exactly who does and doesn't have a positive or negative effect, but it is certainly very, very important so that we can intervene timely and with the correct kind of intervention to give them that support. Definitely. We've got a question here actually, which I think would go perfectly for you, Becky. Someone said, it seems likely that interventions don't sufficiently consider the relationship with mental health during the development and implementation. Is it a case that an intervention that's delivered universally to a group can be developed in a way to incorporate this? Or is it likely to be achieved through individual tailoring and support that runs alongside?
Yeah, so as part of SwimC and the original swim program, we are measuring different aspects of mental health, and what we can do then is look at whether anyone had a negative impact perhaps, and investigate through qualitative interviews and the process of evaluation why that might have been the case. And when we start to learn more about this particular group, we can then do further development work to find out what type of intervention might be more suitable for them, and then protect their mental health. But we absolutely need to look into tailoring these interventions, because one size just does not fit all.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's trying to find a way to deliver scalable care that can also be individually tailored. But I think we're on a good route to building evidence to do that. I've got another question here, and this one has been directed to Charlotte. Said, can the National Centre for Eating Disorders be of any help to your study? You've had a request.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, absolutely. Please feel free to get in contact with me. My email address is on the slides, and I guess are they on the website, the ASO website?
Yeah, so this recording will be on the website, which is a great time to let everyone know.
Yes, please do get in touch. We would love to hear from you. This is really important that we get this full perspective, and I think often we do focus very much on higher BMIs, and we also need to be thinking about eating disorders and the experiences of individuals at the other end of the spectrum in terms of weight. Particularly, there's a lot of concern around a lot of the national obesity strategy, for example, with some of the measures there potentially being really, really problematic for individuals with disordered eating. So yes, please, we would love to hear from you. So please get in touch. You can definitely help us.
Fabulous.
I have a question for Becky Jones. My question is about whether the slight increase in mental health outcomes could be due to artificial aspects within the intervention trials themselves, due to dropout of those with higher depression scores. In your opinion, are the small improvements a true effect? Why or why not? And they've given an example. We found an association between non-clinical levels of higher Beck depression inventory scores with dropout, trial resignation in a weight loss, and I think they've been cut off.
Yes. So yeah, I certainly think that's one possible explanation, and there's definitely work that needs to be done on engagement in general, but especially in groups that are more vulnerable to having poor engagement, which people with poor mental health may be one of those groups. I think it's difficult to answer that conclusively from the evidence that's available right now, but I do suspect that the small improvements are true for most. And like we said, it's an average. I do suspect that subsets of the participants don't experience these improvements, and it's going to be really important and absolutely vital to identify who those subsets of participants are. So we certainly need more work in this area, especially as most studies are lacking the amount of detail that we need to be able to investigate these on a meta-analysis or a review kind of scale. We really need studies to be transparently reporting the findings and thoroughly following trial reporting guidelines so that we can do this kind of work. But yes, I agree that it's very important, very interesting, and something I hope to try and untangle in other parts of my PhD.
So I have a question that you might all contribute to. So I work in a 0 to 19 years service delivering multi-component interventions to families. I worry that our practice over the years has caused more harm than good. Do you know of any studies done with adults who attended lifestyle interventions as children to see the long-term effects of them on their mental health?
I personally don't know of that, although I think that would be a fantastic study, and if someone's doing it, please involve me. That sounds incredible. Yeah, I can understand the concerns over things doing more harm than good. I worked for many years before I got into research as a health trainer delivering tier 2 weight management services, and I can certainly say I've had those concerns myself, and that's what brought me into this work, actually, of wanting to understand, are we helping, are we hindering? Can we be doing both at the same time? Can we be helping some aspects and hindering others? And how can we improve on that? I'm not aware of any studies like that. It would be a very longitudinal study, and as far as I'm aware, there aren't. But if anybody else that's here knows better, please inform.
I think in terms of more immediate data, not talking to adults, but certainly the immediate effects of a weight loss intervention, the evidence is quite good that it doesn't, and this is often the concern of many parents, it doesn't appear to precipitate eating disorders.
Fabulous.
We don't know whether a long-term effect might well be there, but certainly in terms of the 0 to 19 group, there's been quite a good evidence base now that suggests that evidence-based weight management interventions don't precipitate eating disorder development. It's more likely that informal efforts to intervene on the child's weight without professional support, they are slightly more associated with future difficulties with eating.
That's really good. Thanks for your input.
Any bit.
We have a question. Charlotte, this may be best for you, being COVID focused. Occurs in the context of Brexit. Can you assume changes in mental health obesity are specific to the virus?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there's all sorts. It's all a bit doom and gloom at the moment, really, isn't it? The last 4 years or so. Yeah, I mean, we can't specifically attribute this unless people are specifically asked. As in lots of, so the call for action, which I mentioned, that was specifically asking people about their experiences during the virus. So there's obviously that type of research where we can specifically ask people. But obviously, there is, there are many reasons why people are experiencing mental health and these aren't necessarily going to be specific to particular population groups.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very hard to untangle it at the moment, isn't it? Because there's so much going on.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I've got one last question for Becky Jones. Do you think your review was as representative as you intended, and why?
Yes and no. I would say yes, it's representative to what intervention participants genuinely appear to be. There's certainly problems in engagement and attrition and attendance. For getting equality, there's a very high percentage of females that tend to attend interventions, and our review had a very high proportion of females. It does make it difficult to generalise the findings to the general population of adults with overweight and obesity, because the intervention populations and general populations of adults with obesity aren't similar. We have issues in that context, but I would say that I think the review is generalisable to general intervention populations, but not to the overall. There's certainly work that needs to be done on how to improve equality within intervention work. Yes. We've got one final question, actually. I've just got another one that's just come in. What does this is for yourself, Becky, what does the qualitative data look like so far? Does gender seem to influence participants' experiences? I thought they linked on quite well.
Yeah, so we haven't actually conducted the follow-up qualitative interviews yet, but that's definitely something we'll explore. We do have a PhD student with us, Jack Birch at Cambridge, who's looking at inequalities in the uptake and effectiveness of weight management interventions. So keep an eye out for papers from his PhD. Because we do know that I think men, there's sort of less uptake and retention with male participants, but yeah, we're yet to evaluate that with our swim program.
Fabulous. Have you had any feedback so far from any of the participants during like the coach calls, or gotten a sense for how they're doing?
Yes, we have. So we've had to chase participants more than we originally envisaged. So it's delivered online, like we said, and then we just thought that one coach call and one email contact would have been enough to get people through the program potentially. But what we found is that the first 2 sessions focused on diet and physical activity. Participants have said, oh, well, you know, we know this stuff already, and they thought it was going to be a sort of another standard behavioural treatment program. But once we reassured them that that was kind of the standard foundation information that we needed them to sort of progress through to the rest of the program, they really enjoyed the ACT-based content and habit theory content as well. So yeah, the feedback has been really positive. I think they've enjoyed having something new and looking at things from a different perspective. But we'll see when we get to the process evaluation.
Fabulous. It'll be really interesting to see the findings when they come out from that study. Brilliant. Let me see if we have any more questions. So we've got one final question, which I think I'll open to everybody. I think this will be very good for us all to give a perspective on. What do you see to be the research priorities in this area in the coming years? So maybe if I could ask Liz first, you want to, and we'll all give our little input.
I was just going, oh, I'm going to think about that for a while whilst other people answer.
Does anybody else want to jump in?
So I suppose I'm looking that I stuck some research priorities on my last slide, really, aren't I? So let's look at those diagnoses that haven't received so much attention. Depression, rightly, has been really strong. You know, it's been looked at a great deal because it affects so many people, but so does anxiety. So do personality disorders, and some of the weight gain inherent in taking drugs for things like schizophrenia is absolute. You know, it's very hard for patients to deal with. So we need to open up to new categories of mental health problem, as well as those positive mental health elements that I mentioned. That's what I think should be research priorities from my perspective.
Fabulous. Would you like to jump in, Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with my COVID lens on, I mean, this is going to be with us for quite a while. We've just been told, you know, 6 more months dealing with these restrictions. So I think it's really the priority is just trying to understand how we can support all these different groups of people who are struggling. So that will be with mental health, with weight, with both, and giving people sort of quick and easy strategies. I'm not in any way to say it's going to be a quick and easy thing to do, but strategies that people can do, you know, on a daily basis that aren't too effortful, and also sort of looking at how we can maintain people's support networks. I mean, there's fantastic examples of work that was done. I think Becky Richards' example of how the swim program, you know, was able to adapt so quickly and respond to the pandemic. So I think even more of these efforts so we can get these evidence-based interventions out there and accessible for everybody to use.
No, I think that's absolutely perfect, and it's clearly very needed at the moment. Becky?
Yeah, so I'll probably comment on digital technology. So while we know that you know, digital technology is really useful to deliver interventions in other areas of healthcare and weight management as well, you know, will that be sufficient during these new circumstances? So I think hopefully the swim program will help to fill that gap in the research.
Fabulous. What can I add to that? So one thing that I think really is important in the research priorities is, I think, to improve the reporting and improve what we can do with results, is maybe having a standard set of mental health outcomes So more methodology focused research that should be included in all trials, including both positive and negative ones, and what we can include for short term and longer term. I do wonder whether that might help improve the inclusion of mental health outcomes so that we can. So the next time we do this webinar, we'll have much more conclusive findings and we'll all know a lot more about the impact and the role of mental health. Yeah, I think maybe working on methodology to make it easy for people to include mental health would be very helpful. Fabulous, and thank you to everyone who's submitted their questions today and their comments as well. We've had some lovely comments come through, very complimentary. And thank you to all the speakers and to everyone for joining and participating. We've really enjoyed listening to the talks today, and I hope you have too. A recording of the webinar will be available on the ASO website in a few days. And thank you all again so much for joining.